Look, the Phillies are about to make a decision that could either launch them into World Series glory or become the most regrettable contract in franchise history. We're talking about Kyle Tucker, the superstar outfielder who's supposed to be the hottest commodity on the free agent market, commanding a jaw-dropping $427 million price tag. But here's the question that should be keeping every Phillies fan up at night. Is this the game-changing move that finally pushes them over the edge, or are we watching Dave Dombrowski set fire to nearly $500 million on a player who might not even be the right fit? Let's cut through the noise and get real about what's happening in Philadelphia right now. The Phillies offseason is unfolding like a high-stakes poker game, and Tucker's name keeps getting thrown around like he's the golden ticket. But the more you dig into this situation, the more questions emerge. Why would the Chicago Cubs trade legitimate prospects to acquire Tucker only to watch him walk away after one season? What does this mean for fan favorite Kyle Schwarber? And most importantly, is Tucker actually the piece this Phillies puzzle needs? Sporting News recently dropped a report connecting Tucker to Philadelphia, and it's got the entire baseball world buzzing. According to their analysis, Tucker is being viewed as one of the premier free agents available this winter, and the Phillies have positioned themselves squarely in the mix. The Athletics' Jim Bowden went even further, naming Philadelphia as a potential landing spot alongside heavy hitters like the San Francisco Giants, New York Yankees, New York Mets, and Los Angeles Dodgers. That's serious company, and it tells you everything you need to know about the bidding war that's about to ensue. Tucker's resume is undeniably impressive. At just 28 years old, he's a four-time All-Star who was instrumental in the Houston Astros World Series championship run. Last season with the Cubs, despite battling multiple injuries, he posted a slash line of .266 with 22 home runs and an OPS of .841 across 500 at-bats. He walked 87 times, collected 133 hits, and maintained a .377 on-base percentage with a .464 slugging percentage. These are solid numbers, no question about it. Bowden himself described Tucker as a complete player who threatens to hit 30 home runs and steal 30 bases every season. He impacts the game in every facet: hitting, power, defense, arm strength, and speed. On paper, he's everything a championship caliber team could want. But here's where things get interesting and frankly a bit concerning. When you stack Tucker's numbers against what the Phillies already have in Kyle Schwarber, the comparison becomes fascinating and complicated. Schwarber just finished a monster season with 56 home runs, 132 RBIs, a .365 on-base percentage, and a .563 slugging percentage across 604 at-bats. Those are MVP caliber numbers. In fact, Schwarber finished second in MVP voting, so the question becomes painfully obvious. Why would you commit $427 million to Tucker when you already have a clubhouse leader, an offensive powerhouse in Schwarber who could be retained for significantly less money? According to projections, Schwarber's looking at a 5-year, $160 million deal. That's substantial money for a designated hitter, absolutely, but it's less than half of what Tucker's expected to command. And here's the kicker. Multiple reports, including one from Matt Gelb of The Athletic, suggest that Tucker is actually the backup plan if the Phillies can't reach an agreement with Schwarber. Think about that for a second. The guy who's supposed to be the franchise-altering acquisition is actually Plan B. Gelb specifically wrote that if Tucker commands a $400 million deal, the Phillies might not have the fortitude to pull the trigger, especially when they could sign Schwarber plus multiple other players for the same price. The financial mathematics here are crucial to understand. Tucker's projected 10-year, $427 million contract would represent one of the largest commitments in baseball history. For a team that already has significant money tied up in Bryce Harper, Trea Turner, Aaron Nola, and Zach Wheeler, adding another massive contract could severely limit the team's flexibility for years to come. Compare that to keeping Schwarber at $160 million over 5 years, and suddenly you've got nearly $270 million to address multiple needs. Bullpen help, additional starting pitching depth, bench upgrades, you name it. From a roster construction standpoint, it's not even close. Which approach makes more sense? But let's talk about something that doesn't show up in the stat sheets. The intangible factor. Schwarber has become the heartbeat of this Phillies team. He's a vocal leader, a guy who elevates everyone around him, and someone who's embraced the Philadelphia mentality with open arms. The Phillies are a vibes team, a tight-knit group that feeds off energy and camaraderie. When you watch Tucker play, and this is going to sound harsh, but it needs to be said, there's something missing. The body language, the demeanor, the way he carries himself on the field. Now, does that affect his on-field production? Probably not directly, but does it matter when you're building a championship culture? Absolutely. Think about what makes the Phillies special right now. It's not just the talent. It's the chemistry, the swagger, the feeling that this group genuinely enjoys playing together. Harper is the superstar leader. Turner brings steady excellence. Schwarber provides the thunder and veteran presence. When you add a player for nearly $500 million, you're not just acquiring statistics. You're bringing in a personality, a presence that will inevitably shape the clubhouse dynamic. If Tucker doesn't fit that mold, if he's someone who plays with a different energy than what Philadelphia has cultivated, then no amount of home runs and stolen bases will justify that investment. The outfield situation in Philadelphia is admittedly a complete mystery right now. Nick Castellanos' future is uncertain at best, with most indications suggesting he'll be playing somewhere else next season. Harrison Bader's return is questionable. Brandon Marsh is expected to stick around, but the organization has expressed belief in prospect Justin Crawford, though nobody really knows what the game plan looks like. Tucker would theoretically solve that problem by providing an everyday player you can build around, but is he worth $427 million to fill that role when there are cheaper alternatives that might fit the team culture better? Let's also address the elephant in the room, the Cubs' bizarre handling of this entire situation. Chicago traded legitimate prospects to acquire Tucker before the 2025 season, presumably with the intention of building around him as a cornerstone player. He had a solid, if unspectacular, season with them, and now there's seemingly zero expectation or even desire to retain him long term. That's terrible asset management from Chicago's perspective, but it also raises questions about Tucker himself. Was there something about his fit with the Cubs that didn't work? Did he make it clear he was going to test free agency regardless? Or is this simply a case of Tucker following the money wherever the highest bidder happens to be? That last scenario seems most likely, but it's worth considering what that means for team building in Philadelphia. Jim Bowden's list of top free agents and their projected contracts provides additional context. Tucker sits at number one with that $427 million projection over 10 years. Schwarber comes in at 5 years, $160 million, which suddenly looks downright reasonable by comparison. Pete Alonso, another name that's been loosely connected to Philadelphia at 6 years, $182 million, represents an interesting alternative, especially given Bryce Harper's stated willingness to move to the outfield if needed. All of these contract projections illuminate a central truth about the Phillies' offseason strategy. They have significant resources to deploy, but those resources aren't infinite. Every dollar committed to Tucker is a dollar that can't be spent elsewhere. Dombrowski has been remarkably open about his intentions this offseason, making public statements about his desire to improve the team. He's positioned himself as someone with tricks up his sleeve, ready to make bold moves. The comparison to Trea Turner is instructive here. Tucker should probably be viewed through a similar lens as a guy who does all the little things, an everyday player who contributes in multiple ways beyond just home runs. Turner is arguably the better overall baseball player, but Tucker brings comparable versatility. The difference is that the Phillies already made their massive commitment to Turner. Adding another contract of that magnitude creates roster construction challenges that could hamstring the organization for a decade. Consider what $427 million could buy if allocated differently. You could keep Schwarber at $160 million and still have $267 million to work with. That's enough to add 2 or 3 high-impact players who address multiple needs, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket. Maybe you bring in a shutdown closer, add a left-handed bat off the bench, upgrade the defensive outfield depth, and still have money left over. The injury history deserves scrutiny as well. Last season, Tucker dealt with multiple ailments that limited his ability to stay on the field consistently. For a guy whose value proposition includes speed and defense, alongside hitting and power, durability becomes paramount. A 10-year contract assumes health and sustained performance deep into his 30s. That's an enormous gamble for any player, but especially for someone who's already shown vulnerability to the injury bug. Meanwhile, Kyle Schwarber represents a known quantity. Yes, he's primarily a designated hitter at this point, which means you're paying top dollar for someone who doesn't contribute defensively. But his offensive production is elite, his leadership is irreplaceable, and his comfort level in Philadelphia is evident every time he steps to the plate. He understands what it means to play in this city, to handle the pressure, to embrace the expectations. Here's a thought experiment worth considering. If you could have Kyle Schwarber plus 2 or 3 solid complementary pieces, or just Kyle Tucker for essentially the same total investment, which roster construction gives you a better chance to win the World Series? Baseball is a team sport where depth matters enormously, especially over the grueling 162-game season and into October. The diversified approach might not generate the same buzz, but it might prove more effective when games actually count. If Tucker does indeed command something close to $400 or $500 million in this bidding war, it seems increasingly likely that the Phillies will bow out of those negotiations. Dombrowski is aggressive and willing to spend, but he's also experienced enough to know when a price has spiraled beyond reasonable value. The Yankees, Mets, Giants, and Dodgers all represent serious competition for Tucker's services. Each of those organizations has deep pockets and pressing needs. If it turns into a bidding war between Los Angeles and New York teams, Philadelphia might find themselves priced out regardless. So where does all this leave us? The Kyle Tucker sweepstakes represents everything thrilling and terrifying about modern baseball free agency. For the Phillies, Tucker represents a potential solution to their outfield questions and a marquee addition that would signal championship ambitions. But he also represents enormous financial risk, questionable culture fit, and the opportunity cost of not spending those resources in more targeted ways. The smart money seems to be on Philadelphia prioritizing Schwarber, then using whatever remaining financial flexibility they have to address multiple needs rather than chasing Tucker at any cost. That's the move that balances competitiveness with sustainability, that maintains the team's chemistry while still improving the roster. But we can't rule out the possibility that Dombrowski sees something in Tucker that makes the investment worthwhile despite all the questions. What do you think? Is Tucker worth $427 million for the Phillies, or should they stick with Schwarber and spend that money elsewhere? What move would you make if you were running the show? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of the biggest decisions in franchise history, and we're all watching to see how it plays out.